Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Snowpiercer. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have that opening with the whole, Big Alice situation, and obviously getting, Wilford's perspective on things. Obviously, it's just kind of showing, obviously so far in the series, obviously we've seen how Snowpiercer interacts with the head of, hospitality and everything kind of interacts with the train. Obviously, we get Wilford's, the real Wilford's perspective, in Big Alice, even playing some classical music and stuff like that. We even see the Icy Bob situation because you can definitely tell he enjoys the position that he's in, that he almost reigns over Big Alice as a god with the iron fist. And it seems like there are some people, it's that conversation about, better to be feared or loved. And in some cases, it seems like there are people who maybe, in the case of Snowpiercer, there's people who love him. It seems like the people on Big Alice fear him. Now, I guess in some cases it's love, but I guess it's love born from fear. Because it's just day in and day out, it's just more people almost have to accept him for the way he is, because if they don't accept him, and that's kind of being on his shit list. But what I think is interesting is the Icy Bob thing, because I'm like, for what purpose are you setting that up? I guess it's Icy Bob being able to do what he does, being able to withstand the very harsh cold, benefits them anytime they've needed it in the past, in the time it took them to set up the train, but also anytime anything's happened where they've had to kind of lay low for a while in preparation to keep going. I guess it's nice to have someone who can withstand the cold and kind of help, fix any situation. He won't, even if something happens to his suit or whatever, he's able to kind of keep going. But later on, he's saying let's get Icy Bob. We need him to be able to go even lower temperatures, even for longer. And they're so we got a month. He's like, you got half that time. And I'm like, part of me is I only assume he wants Bob to be able to handle colder, harsher temperatures for longer, because I guess he's going to use Bob as a means of killing Melanie. That's what I can only assume. And I guess in that, it's okay, why aren't you giving him the full month? So not less, they're going to get away for about half a month. Give them enough time so that when it's time for them to circle back around, they can, in that half-month period, okay, Bob, you're good, you're ready for it, so now we're going to ship you off, and you're going to go back to that station, and you're going to kill Melanie, and by the time the train, you've got half a month until the train circles back around to come pick up Melanie. You need to have it done before then. I can only assume that's what Wilford's got in plan, because I'm why the half-month period otherwise, Because if he waited the full month, it'd be too suspicious for Melanie just to up and die just around then. Can't take the chance that she might survive, and obviously too many questions. So it's you got to make it happen now before the train circling back to get to her. Or at the very least, if he doesn't directly kill her, at the very least prevent her from getting on the train when they pass by. Because obviously if she doesn't have enough to survive, obviously she's only got enough to last that month. So it's if she isn't able, granted, getting there is a whole hassle within itself, and if she doesn't make it there, it's all for nothing anyway. But if she doesn't make it back on the train when they circle back in a month, she's as good as dead, because she doesn't have what's necessary to survive. So I guess it's kind of a win-win situation in that regard. But nevertheless, it is a situation where obviously they need to cooperate. All the train in totality having to work together to make this situation possible, because the climb that they need to make is a very steep one. So they're going to need the power, especially because Snowpiercer's not in the best condition, but Big Alice can activate the boosters and kind of compensate for that. So it's a conversation back and forth about how this whole thing is going to operate. And so they're trying to work out the final kinks to it. What I thought was really interesting, though, is when Melanie is talking to Leighton about don't ever lie to Ruth, because basically Ruth can be your greatest asset. She can she's basically saying that she's an arrow that can kind of shoot true as long as you keep honest with her. She's I lied to her, and now I'll probably never be able to make up for everything between us, because at one point in time Ruth was not just a colleague but a friend. Obviously that relationship is deteriorated over time just because of the lies and everything, but it's if you can, she's a great asset. If you have her by your side, as long as you're truthful to her, it can only benefit you in the long run, because she's someone you want on her side. Because Ruth is someone who is, obviously we see her dedication to Wilford. If you give her honesty, she will give you 100%, she'll give you 110% back, so that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Obviously, it's the whole conversation about like, you know, exchanging of supplies, but it's like, oh, Ben, you're not going. It's like, it's a Ben free zone. Okay, so Melanie's like, I'll go, and also Alex will help me out with the whole situation. So, and you know, you have him kind of, you know, Wilford agreeing to those terms. So at the same time in this episode, we also have, you know, Till still doing her investigation. The person they're looking into now are the Breachmen, because they're the ones who are also supportive of the there's a group that are supportive, because obviously it's like, you know, because obviously I love the whole Roche thing of like, because Andre's like, I need you to go, can you go with her to see the Beachman? And he was like, no. And then Andre's like, thank you, and he keeps walking. And it's like, I think for her it's like, what makes her a little easy about the situation is reminding herself, kind of just treating them like firemen. Go in there, kind of, they almost seem like they're the muscle-bound group, and it's like she's asking about the Wilford thing, but they're like, we honestly have no reason. Yes, we're supporters of Wilford, we believe in him, but at the same, because it's also like, where were you during the war and everything? It's like, yeah, we kept to ourselves. Like, you know, we, upon finding out that Wilford wasn't really on the train, we were disheartened, so we stayed behind. During the war, we ignored things. It's like, we don't need to go around threatening people, cutting off fingers or whatever. It's like, because Wilford is back now, and it's only a matter of time until he gets the train, so all we have to do is wait. So we just sit by, we stay out of your business, you guys stay out of ours, and eventually Wilford's going to take over the train anyway. So that's the justification for, like, we're not the ones responsible, because we know it's all going to work out in our favor at the end. But it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not responsible for it, especially because at those points later on when Bess is looking at them, like the one in particular who plays Home Dude from Van Helsing. God, it's been so long I'm blanking, but it's like he did the 3-finger thing. It's like he's almost like rubbing it in their face. So it's like they're the number one suspects, but, you know, maybe that's a little too easy. You know, we'll find out. Because, I mean, maybe is Lights the only victim? I mean, it seems like that so far, but who's to say there won't potentially be other victims? And later on, maybe Lights is lucky enough that she got away with her life, but maybe later on things escalate and it turns into a situation of, hey, now we've not only found people with missing fingers, which is also interesting, because obviously I brought up, like, you know, that actor's from Van Helsing. It's interesting because Sam did the whole cutting off people's fingers thing. So that was, spoilers. That was season 1, but still spoilers, I guess. So it's just interesting to think about, like, oh, there was a fingers thing in that, and there's also a fingers thing. Regardless, I just thought that was kind of interesting. You also have, like, Ruth loving her opportunity, like, obviously being hospitality, answering, like, oh, we have basically a landline on this side of things, on this side of the border, and she's answering, oh, this is Snowpiercer, hospitality answer, and obviously Andre's coming up with his own plans to kind of skew things in his favor, kind of, you know, and so he ends up, obviously Melanie wants a lot of supplies, and Wilford's like, oh, you want all this stuff? He's like, I can give you some of what you want. Oh, I have 3 of those vault things, and she's like, well, she's like, oh, he's like, you're not getting one. She's like, you have 3? He's like, yes. But if I give you one, I'm only going to have 2. So, but it's like, they still manage to get what they want, especially when Andre presents the food. And you can tell the look on everyone else's faces because they are getting a little Homer Simpson, like, donuts, you know, type of situation. So, but granted, they're being a little steadfast. Because they're also like, oh, where's Kevin? Shouldn't he be handling this? Oh, Kevin's ill. Kevin's dead. Just kind of skating over that. Because if they find out Kevin's dead, that'd put a damper over his, you know, need to control people. But it wasn't enough to sway anything. Because obviously, like, Andre throws a piece of food at, like, his, like, right hand person, and it hits her and just lands, because it's like she's steadfast, because she also knows, like, what Kevin did, so she knows, you know, I'm not going to be tempted by you guys. I'm gonna be steadfast in my belief in Wilford. So it's like, all right, we'll get you everything you need. And so the circumstances of them setting it all up, Melanie and Alex ended up having some bonding time together, and obviously the whole point of it for Wilford didn't want her to get all sentimental. It's like the whole point is he wants her to be a little hardened, especially when it comes to Melanie. But regardless of anything, that's still her mom. She's a little girl that's missed her mom for all these years. And yes, she's a little spiteful towards her mom, but it's still an opportunity, especially when Melanie was like, I want to get to know all there is to know about you. It's like, she's like, for you leaving before is one thing, but now you leaving again is a choice. And she's like, yes, it's an awful thing, but I am choosing to leave because I want to leave a world that's better for you. So it is a thing of like, we kind of have to make choices and make sacrifices for the people we care about, you know? So it's like, what do you want to do in this time? It's like, I want to know all there is to know about you. Where do you sleep? Who pierced your ears, you know? Will you ever laugh? And she's like, ha 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 ha. And they kind of have this nice moment. It's like, slowly but surely, Alex probably didn't really see it coming, but Melanie has kind of started chipping away at that wall around her. Even that person that was with her being like, whoa, should you really be bringing her here? It's like, it's fine. Wilford won't. I'll kind of smooth things over with him. But showed her, you know, her bunk. And it's like she does the same thing with, like, you know, the train's movements around certain places. Like, she lines everything out, and Melanie's like, I do the same thing too. She's got a picture of Melanie. She's like, I've always wanted to imagine what you look like now. So it was just this nice moment. Even her doing the whole thing of touching the train. It's like, oh yeah, Snowpiercer's reached that point. You've also got like a wheeled situation you need to be checking out on. She's like, you can tell that just by touching. She's like, yeah, like, you know. And Alex does it later on, and it's like, yeah, she was totally right. There ended up being like in particular will. It's like she's becoming more and more impressed with her mom, but he has to kind of rein her back in and being like, oh, you're not getting sentimental. And she's like, no, repeat it. Look at me and repeat after me. She has to get off this train. It's like, she has to get off the train. He's like, good. As long as you're like my little soldier. Because Andre has a moment with Ben about the whole situation, because it's like, you know, he's like, that's the whole thing. That's the problem with Wilford. He sucks you in. He makes you feel like you're important. Like, oh, being next to him is like the best. It's so amazing until the knives come out. And so he's like, oh, so that's what the whole Ben fly zone thing was about. Because Ben was like, him and Melanie saw Wilford for who he was. And Ben's like, yeah, probably. But it's like, for Wilford, it's not about love, betrayal, or sex. It's about control. And that's what that all comes down to for him. Like, once again, he's kind of on his high horse about this God complex. He has control of Big Alice, and he wants to be controlled. That's what this all is for him. He wants to take that control. And he's even making a game out of it, because he's like, honestly, Andre being left alone, like, obviously Melanie going off her mission, hey, it removes her from the board, because Melanie knows him so well. So she'd be able to guide Andre and how to deal with him. But it's like, if she's off the train, that just leaves me and the revolutionary, which obviously things are already turning against Andre as they are. We'll get to that in a second. So all Wilford needs to do is push the right buttons without Melanie being there, and it kind of make everything come crashing down, because it's not like everything's copacetic. Like, not everything worked. Because Wilford came at literally the worst time. It's like, you show up just when Snowpiercer's in that transitioning period, and it doesn't even get an opportunity to fully transition to like this new democracy that they're trying to create, because him popping up is kind of like, well, we can't fully assimilate our situation until we deal with this megalomaniac trying to take over, trying to get back what's his. But at the end of the day, you know, Andre was making a promise with Ben, like, hey, you know, we'll get Melanie back. You know, that was kind of their promise. It's like, and because of that, you know, in preparation for whatever it is that he's got planned, no secrets between each other. You know, no secrets, because we need to all be on the same page when it comes to dealing with him, because we needed to be a fully united front if it means crossing paths with him. Which even Andre's in this complicated position, because he's going to see Josie, and obviously some of the other tailies are looking at him a certain way. And it's also because it's like, not only are the circumstances what they are, you know, it's like, well, because for Josie, it's like, well, you went back to Zara. It's like, well, you thought I was dead. But he's like, you're not dead. But there's also the thing of, you're working with a woman that basically did this to me. So, but it's like, oh, working with Melanie was a necessary evil. But it's like, as a tale, they had their own plans on how they were going to take over the train and what that was going to be. But now it's like, you're literally working with the enemy. Like, you went from being a revolutionary to a politician. And it's like, because of that, the people in the tale are looking at you a certain way, because you made promises. They thought, hey, you're one of us. But now it looks like, now that you got the power and position, it looks like you kind of left that behind, that you're not the revolutionary that you once were. And she's like, you kind of need me to kind of basically turn everyone kind of back towards you. And it's sucky, because the complicated thing is, Andre and Melanie do have a good relationship. That's actually kind of the messed up aspect of it all. Because it's like, you know, some of the people from the tale died because of this union and stuff like that. And obviously there were a lot of deaths because of like you going with her. Because obviously, remember all the people Andre had to sacrifice and didn't save. And it's like, everyone knows. Some of the people in the tale hold it against them. Not everyone does, because, you know, I think people know who Andre is at his heart. But I think bringing Josie back under these circumstances, like, I think beforehand she definitely followed Andre. She believed in the cause enough to die. She believed in Andre enough and what he was leading the people towards. Not necessarily at this point. So I'm curious to see what that kind of means in the long run. I think that's going to play a role in where Andre is, where he's kind of leading the group and everything, but at the same time he's in this very compromised position because Josie's going to be there reminding him of like, oh, you've changed. You're not the same person that you were. You don't have the same fight in you like before. And I think that, I don't know. I'm reading too much into this, but I get the feeling like this might be a situation where Josie's like, Andre can't be trusted anymore. We need to take him off the board. So inadvertently, Josie might end up becoming an antagonist of her own right. And her playing a role in all this might... It's so interesting because Zara seemed like we had to worry about her last episode. Still potentially, but it seems like she's kind of let that go. We'll see. But Josie might end up being an issue as well, especially if it's something that... Wilford learns about and kind of uses that to his advantage, kind of manipulate. He's very good at manipulating people and getting what he wants, so he can end up manipulating Josie and kind of convincing her. Just much like he's manipulating Alex, maybe he can end up doing the same thing for Josie. We'll have to wait and see, but obviously they need the power of like first and second class cars to like make this trip, so everyone kind of has to move back. Audrey in the third car is drinking, and she's kind of a mess. You've never actually seen her like this before. Even Roach is like, what's up with her? It's like, she's cracking, dude. And, because Bess is like, she's cracking? We literally are, we all are if you can't tell. But there was also that moment between her and Pastor, was it Logan, where, like, he's giving her that chain and everything. Part of me's like, are we going to find out he's the one responsible for it? Because he's putting on this, obviously, like, dude. But then also there's another part of me that's like, or is that kind of insinuating there's kind of going to be a thing between them? Because even Roach is kind of looking like, what the hell's going on here? Because he gives her the necklace. Because obviously for her, she doesn't think that's going to be enough. But he's kind of saying, well, you don't know. So I'm like, I'm curious where that storyline between the two of them goes. Because I'm getting the feeling like she might get close to him and then find out, oh, he's actually the one responsible for all this. I mean, obviously, he's the first person she met with during this investigation. But I'm like, I don't know what to kind of make heads or tails of that whole situation. So, obviously, we have Pike's whole situation of, hey, his, working with the custodian doesn't really work out because he can't necessarily be the smuggler since all the trade stuff has been kind of a lot more shut down. But then later on, Andre's like, hey, I will open up the pathway so that you can get weed. That's it. But you have to open up your contacts on the other side so we can trade stuff. And it's like, well, that's exactly what Melanie was saying. Like, don't keep stuff from Ruth. Tell her, trust her. So will he inform her about this? Probably not. And that's going to be issues in its own right. Especially because Ruth is already very pro Wilford. Like, you go down this route and lie to her, you're not only going to push her away from you, but you're going to push her towards Wilford, and that's the last thing you want. I mean, to be fair, he doesn't really see her for herself, because at the end of the day, she's like, oh, I'd like to go, but it's like, no, you'll get your time soon enough on, Big Alice, Ruth, so just kind of wait your turn, essentially, And speaking of Wilford, we have that whole situation where he's saying like, oh, Alex should be the one that drives Alice to kind of navigate this whole train situation, kind of putting all the pressure on her, even being like, no, go ahead, don't press the boost, then you can keep mommy all to yourself. And it's like, I'm like, why are you doing that? It's like, you want to get rid of Melanie, so why? But I guess it's like, at the end of the day, he's trying to, I guess, test her loyalty to a certain extent. It's like, you do want her to stay, don't you? So don't press the boost. And she presses the boost. And because even insinuating earlier, it's like, oh yeah, hopefully Alice and Alex doesn't screw this up, because hey, all our lives are in her hand. And obviously, Melanie brings that up to her later. It's like, he was trying to put all those deaths on you. And think about, like, the way you are now, that cruelty, it isn't you. That's him. That's how he operates. So don't feel like you have to be responsible for anything. Like, that's not you. It's not your fault. Kind of saying that that's just how Wilford operates. He wanted all those deaths to kind of be on your conscience, because it's his way to kind of force you into control. Because when it was all said and done, Alex kind of broke down and cried, and he was like, no more tears. And she was like, these are the last tears you ever get to see. And he's kind of like, you'll ever get. And he's like, good. Because it's like, he needs her to be strong, because it's like, if she's so emotional and attached to Melanie, when the time comes for him to make his move, he needs her on his side. But it's obviously he's losing a little bit of control. And it was a neat moment with Melanie as she's kind of saying her goodbyes to everything, to Andre being like, letting him know ahead of time of like, there's like one thing he's like, yeah, like focus on like the science, protect that. And she's like, good. Cause she's like, you're gonna be basically dealing with Wilford on your own. But it's like the most important thing is the data. Whatever happens to me, if I die, basically if I die at the end of this, it doesn't matter. What's most important is that data, because that will be proof enough of whether or not there is some truth to what we were bringing up before, and we can get more of a better time frame and understanding of exactly what's going on, whether the Earth really is fully coming back or not. She also has her moment with Ruth where she was like, I need you to look after Alex for me. I just need it to be someone I trust, and I trust you. Because she had the whole conversation like, you can trust Leighton, he's a good man, and you're a good person too. But Ruth is like, yeah, but how long does that being a good person last under these circumstances? Because that goodness eventually will fade away, and you kind of have to do a lot of stuff that you're not too favorable of. Because even she's kind of crossed that line when it was the whole like mutiny against Melanie type of situation. So granted, it wasn't as bad as everything else they've done, but still, Ruth has tried to stay kind of a little bit more on one lane of things without, crossing over that line, like whether Andre and the Revolution calls or Melanie and everything that she's done. But it's like, Ruth being like, okay, I will keep that promise. I promise you I'll look after Alex, of course, and kind of tearing up because I think it's like, regardless of everything, it's like, you are trusting me to look after your daughter. And it's like, we were good friends at one point in time, but it's like, engineer, we'll all be waiting for you to come back, Once again, it's like she was enemy numero uno, but now it's just kind of like everyone's seeing her off. Be fair, not everyone's probably being truthful. I mean, she's a necessary evil for a lot of people, but I think even Andre sees her as that to a certain extent, but I think he also does see her as an ally, because even Wilford is poking the bear. I also should take note of this. Obviously, I've not seen a lot of the stuff that Sean Bean has been in, but even like so I've not seen everything in his filmography. I've seen like a fraction of the first episode of Game of Thrones years ago, but so this is like the first time I've ever seen him, like fully heard him like use his natural accent. If I never thought about that till this episode. I was like, right, anytime I've ever seen him in stuff, like I said, I haven't seen his entire filmography, but like some of the stuff I've seen him in, growing up and over the years, it was like, right, you've always had an American accent, so like it's so interesting to hear you use your natural accent in this. I don't know, maybe he's modifying it by making it a little more posh, especially considering like who Wilford is, kind of that arrogance, like it denounce and needs kind of like this posh accent to kind of amplify that like arrogance and all holier than thou and almighty like aspect of himself. Not trying to say anyone that has like a quote unquote posh accent does, but that's kind of what that is, kind of like, oh, you talk all posh and shit, so it's kind of in that vein, but I don't mean to kind of use it as a detriment to anyone that talks in that manner. But I think it's like I said, I think that's just like his natural accent. I don't think he's influxing it to be more posh or any of that. I think that's because it comes off a little poshish, but I mean, I'm sure people from Europe or the UK are probably like, that's not a posh accent. I'm ignorant. My worldview is very skewed, so I do apologize if I'm wrong, because I'm most likely wrong, because I don't really know that much about the different regions, accents. I mean, obviously, like I know a Cockney accent. I know potentially a Welsh accent. I mean, not saying I know how to do them, but like I can distinguish them easily enough. But I'm going on a huge tangent, so ignore me. But the episode ends, obviously, with Melanie saying her final goodbyes to Alex and her hugging her, and it's just like, I wanted you to not, I wanted to push those brakes so bad. It's just like, I just got you back in my life and I don't want to let you go. And it's like, she's like, I'll see you soon, Alex. And she's like, I'll see you in a month, Mom. Constantly referring to her as Mom is, it's really sweet. So I'm under these developments, even telling her, hey, kind of like a little bit like Ruth being like, telling her like, you do have, if you ever need anything, there are people on Snowpiercer you can trust. I'm assuming she's referring to both Andre as well as Ruth, so maybe even Ben. So part of me, I'm going ahead and throw it out there. I think Ben's going to die this season, just because it'd be the biggest middle finger to Melanie, whether Wilford does it himself, just because I think it'd probably mean a lot more to him to do it, but it probably means a lot more if he was able to manipulate Alex into doing it or getting someone else to do it. But I think Ben's going to die just because he wants Melanie to hurt. Granted, just on the off chance she makes it back, he wants her to hurt. because he's not planning on her making it back on the train after that month period. But we'll see. Obviously, the episode ends with her, about to set out on her journey. So we'll see whether everything at the station kind of works out, especially because she's got the supplies and everything, but it's still a thing of like, yeah, getting there is half the journey within itself. That's a whole struggle in its own right, but also surviving that month. So we'll see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I'm assuming like maybe 1 or 2 episodes will probably be dedicated wholly. Maybe they'll kind of bounce back and forth, but I feel like there's probably going to be some times where it's probably just going to be, and I think it'd be interesting. I don't know whether, I'm not, because I didn't watch the preview, because I avoid watching previews, because I want to go into the next episodes not knowing anything at all. So once again, that applies to every show, not just this one. So but I get a feeling like I'm cute, because some shows structurally will do this where like they'll take an entire episode and dedicate it to one particular thing. So maybe an entire episode will be dedicated to not only Melanie getting there, but also like her sticking around. Maybe like the entire month will be an entire episode. Now, whether that's the next episode and then like the episode after that, we'll kind of find out what happened on Snowpiercer in that month period. Well, maybe that's what happened. Maybe not. Reading too much into it, but I think that'd be an interesting thing, because I've seen stories kind of do a similar thing of like giving you different perspectives on that, rather than bouncing back and forth over the course of like maybe 1 or 2 episodes or a couple episodes, take an entire episode with Melanie over that month period for one episode, and then the next episode the entire month period on Snowpiercer, and see what happens. I think that could be interesting. Whether they'll do that or not, entirely up to them, obviously. But like I said, I'm interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this, regardless. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.